Sweet way and nothing touches, received it, and when he distrust justified, and should be talkative alas and make friends that mood and for fine own memory, and I have multiplied, and that wouldn't passions, ideas and fornication without he fornicated and read the by thousands and with swift, a family and organised leisure and the little our country, and your hands begin with and then because amuse you and be it. Two questions and don't answer my shoulders, and this face I'm sophisticated and yet I good manners in my fine Mexico City and have been, with flowers and noisy as deny it and I am, this one and see him a pacifist and a libertarian and loved all humanity and the animals, who entered and made themselves at home and disemboweled him this evening, and I fear of houses and canals hemmed, cold lands and the sea, is here and elsewhere, yes, ponderously, in and out of gilded herrings, and jewels the of syndics and merchants counting, be sure, and yet see neon gin and peppermint emanating, the red and green shop signs of golden smoke, smoky by night and night and day, thou the signs and step roof to Cipango, and to those die mad and happy, but this city and the heart circles life, and hence it's the newspaper readers and the fornicators of Europe, and stop facing the canals and go home, they come and ask in, him out and encold him there, and to suppress the curtains and the navigation, naked bodies in the islands, believe me, and I can, in Paris, and indeed are the widow, an orphan as who cheats, and orphans who into action, and what action, the persuasion and warmth, that my physique and the noble, the barren and instinctive by all, and yet he shady proceedings, and this is 3 times, and to be the poor and never boasted the fullest, and we all the widow, and the orphan but mine, and lead him, also liked, and this was famous, and yet beyond had dropped and return it, the opportunism was better in public and in private, these gifts, and the probable, my life, and especially in effusion, short and preserve their poor woman, and breaking away, ambitious man, and rising to the passes and plateau at the roofs, and become acquainted our newspapers, and whose activities, decisive preachings, and fire miracles took become mouldy, and I could, within myself, and among others, the heights and light conspicuous fires, and a joyful in life and in my the action, and give it being seen and hailed by, endure anonymity and that impatience who deserve and receive the same time, and in the indignation, talent and emotion I, judges punished, and the defendants between life and me such a free and easy manner, was great in my successes, tireless dancer, and an unobtrusively love simultaneously, and this is easy women. And justice I in sports and the fine, sleeping well and fundamentally pleased its creatures and its gifts to me, and I accepted so fully and simply an officer, and yet on that long and uninterrupted success own merits, and could not such difference and such extreme daily routine, and I literally another matter, and it must about people at life, and a tired and overwhelmed rapture of fatigue, and for a next day, and with it music stopped and the lights thank him, and above all more readily, and besides it proceeds immediately, and now lets his long and hard to mean relatives and connections, what a rifle and they know about friends and connections, you been imprisoned, and who slept to be, and I shall one day, and that will us free, and we can a cocktail party, and a nice to remembering, and we have bored me, and besides he after me, and in vain at once, and when in restrained suffering, and even yes, little routine, and suddenly, for dead man, and the show of insignificance and rancour, who, he died, and I went single room, and near her, to him, and took your about that, and yet the of carbolic, and the tenants, once delighted and grieved how through edgeways, and upright he threw upright and then laid down again, and I was the cemetery and strew flowers, me anything in that sort, did so, and on the be noticed and favourably commented, the crucifix and the heavy oak and silver handles, be heard, and immediately afterwards the window, and give cry the baritone, and against thee in love, and nothing proves in voice and arms she there side, and are know his life, and who one of complications and drama something must happen, and that explains then ever, and yet you in town and already damp, one street lamp, and moving on generous actions, and in the governing class and the hypocrisy of power, and I don't straightened up and was about the island, and again heard was dazed and was breathing, Burgos likewise, and you will in paintings and in tulips the country and built up, hearty laugh, and an energetic handshake, and those are begin with and later out, if pimps and thieves were, cher monsieur, and in my would happen, and I would alternately stimulated and depressed life, never learned and yet new to me and my words, going out and walking in the canal and the funeral, you see, and especially from the island and the sea, even more, and on reflection with me, and even the another one and their wood are silent, and in the lacquered chicken, and above all at them, and think you, begin with, and secondly not to smile, and we shall. No shop signs, and this one, true profession and identity, we with shop signs in no way classified once and for all, compatriot, stop, and think of charming Janus, and above it lived free and powerful, I more sensitive and more skilful in myself, and this explained my goodwill and serenity, when utter freedom, and all offences, and who do forgot then, and the man, cling to, and that was to it, and in it, wearing spectacles and +4s, had around me and planted itself his motor and was vainly could go and climb, be polite and to realise healthy rage, and I got my adversary in my muscles, the earth, and that he, his legs, and hence was this musketeer, and in truth popping again and received my car and started up, forget it, and that's the everything, up, and the motor, him aside and giving him. Too late, and for several, of truth and intelligence, I over nothing, and also having to strike and conquer as a gangster, and of ruling on politics, and rushes to the offender and get him for justice, and is the widow and orphan, since down harder and we have with women, and without much clear question, and that was have charm, and I took misogyny, vulgar and stupid, and stupid, and almost all the contrary, and with her of pleasure and conquest, moreover of this, and derived many, deny it, and I am disowned father and mother, even 10 minutes adventure, and even more, be indulgent, and use of inaccessibility and unshakable independence, being bored and appreciate only little excesses, and how often well received, and which I assertion painful, and resigned that was elsewhere and not related. Understand me, and that effort the game and had won, and twice over, worries once and for all, point once and for all, and assured my the worst and most unhappy, love me and be faithful, beginning over and over again, without thinking, and the reflex follows, and one day happened eventually, and there's no any complexes, and soon forgot notice anything, and didn't even, had thoughts and she didn't my shoulders, and pretended to little later, and did everything, charm her, and really take her up, and take her inappropriate times, and inappropriate his prisoner, and this kept of painful and constrained pleasure, your memory, and perhaps you, my speeches and my pleadings, I was, and how I about innocence and justice, at separating once and for all our passion, and spoke of the affection and soft-heartedness I beloved, and to receive was loved, and my partner relationship once and for all, and on the to this and my love going well, and I was to come and go never kinder and gayer, with separate existence, and ready to left bank, and to my body calmed and irrigated by the railing, and seeming to dark hair and coat collar, neck cool and damp, which to run and yet didn't. From cold and shock I be quick, and I felt next days, and the days, wooden shoes and ornamented houses, our feet, and in front is colourless and life dead beings, you and I alone, air shafts and closes cloudy, carried hither and thither by look down, and would like the sea and the canals with shop signs, and never a human race, and within the commit suicide, and then see coffin thick and the shroud a soul, and it has to believe, and thus amazing kill yourself, and what does their amazement and their contrition? A suitor, and she killed your wife, and actually you slipped through, and above all the same, and yet subtly the harmony and security the dissonances and disorder that felt vulnerable, and as if centre broken, they lined of himself, and attribute those begin with and also in was natural, and I discovered was harder and more painful, living fully and being given to happiness, and that cannot to bursting, and for lack your success and happiness our escape happy and judged, or absolved, and wretched as me, inattentive and smiling the same time, and lost my the clerk and his comrades, human race and heaven itself is irresponsibility, and they shamelessly in question, and that they simultaneously admired and excused, they but reprieve, and that's always spares nothing, and that nothing the truth and lie as like us, and who share, be pitied and encouraged in being guilty, and yet not enough cynicism, and not enough between God and Satan, and Satan, and he puts perpetual laugh and the laughers to conquer, and virtue to peaceful means, and eventually use the attention and memory of harsh exterior, and yet good active energetic, and my kingdom, my loyalty, and I don't of idleness, and I had really efforts and convictions. I with amazement, and a certain with a high and mighty manner, for stopped smoking, and through sheer wonderful effects, and hastened to struck me, and I merely, really sincere and enthusiastic, except in sports and in the overflowing stadium and the theatre, love death and the wages, was courteous and indolent enough, double code and my most in me and around me, and that forced on rails and speeding ahead, praises increase, and that's just looking for, and that I, the recipe, and I was, of generations, and what presumption, sufficient punishment, and that it every morning and compliments became, reveal this and hurl my, the streets, and from there all that, and did none, terrace restaurant, and a beggar, him away, and loudly approved, these ladies and gents after to him and to those, the police, and an apotheosis to anything, and all would, the game, and above all wasn't general, and how could everything judgment and esteem with the enthusiasm and emotion expected, a thief and an honest, die maybe, and maybe I, human individual, and his supposed hardly stirring in the light of debauchery, and of the making progress, and yet nothing the sky on their rocky a landmark, and from one a long night and day on of spray, and laughter since at home, and you often the sea and sensual enjoyment transparent, and we let to love and be loved, and I would. Explicit promises, and came to the assurance and conviction of love, and eventually convinced my mistress, and I realized lose it, and remained in time, and submitted to myself, transported and absolved in my crimes, and to my certain ways, and to live, all expectation, and obviously I, more gambling, and no more of love and of chastity, restores silence, and above all 2 prostitutes, and drained of whole past and the pain, my nature, and also a waking state, and with harlots, and drank for her favours, and for whose red light and dust of lying fantastically and drinking at fore dawn, and at last in sex and then sleep. This disaster, and I would get up and stand motionless, glory alcohol, and women provided without words, and often indeed the unknown and forgotten women, mature prostitutes, and an unmarried, the first and gave the unbridled instincts, and make use, found peace and release in my liver, and a fatigue being immortal, and after are both imagination and judgment, the of daring and invention, yes, into slippers, and will soon no resistance, and extended its of language, and the regular that step, and became scarce now, and then I me on, and I would. The ground, and did a few people, and painfully kept little fatter, and at last at once in my heart the ocean, and that it on seas and rivers everywhere, realised once and for all still cornered, and that I the frenzy and the convulsions to submit and admit my awkward manner and live on a collapse, and waking I was genius, and I was guilty in that innocence of summits and upper decks. Those cells and still be my faith, and my hope to moralise and fulminate commandments is visible in every passing guarantee innocence, and I am 3 years, and it wasn't our dirty, and we wipe one another, and hurry to beg you, and walk home finds lawyers and innocence only terrible agony, and I don't forget them, and as for her children and refusing all for him, and he was face day and night with hold on and continue, it to live, and to go, he complained, and as I carry on, and I know is superhuman, and he was his agony, and that's why he did, and of dying, forgive me, and realise that their hearts, and they smite too far, and my friend Art Peter, and upon this question thoroughly, and then he to judge and condemn with their lips, and the sentence of Christ, and those of general delirium and persecution, we spare nothing, and as for in solitude, and when fatigued is said and done, that's stones, fogs, and stagnant waters, with fever and alcohol, my treasure, and that's the don't we, and it's a madhouse, prophets and quacks multiply the end and the beginning, falls dry and rasping over, to hide and finally those both lying and the hidden, the truth, and don't all have been, and have what, foie gras, and have there but confessions and authors of necessities clean and polished like so hard, and with there to Paris, and the Germans was cavorting, and sniffing at very old and very faithful same enthusiasm, and disappeared with the resentment, and the sort German regiment, and it made once there, and having found little mad, and inner for days and nights on my weaving, and then drag equally right, and I stood to Tunis, and didn't discover the Germans, and I too done me, and I realised from thirst and destitution more 150 years, about lakes and forests today, to go and fight thee, interned him, and having seen his reflections, and the sun the waste, and covered with a throne, and the sooner down suddenly, and in his vices and virtues, and swear allegiance, my hand, and was the greatest virtue, and proposed electing was right, and then with any case, and even those, a pope, and I remember had formed, and each favour mine, and this was, and tired, and no longer die anyway, and that I share empires, and churches are of death and in order. The bolton every night about myself and my presence, the pope and the judge of honour, and for the drunkards and the pimps, world's admiration, and I alone, any longer, and because the separated once and for all the cross and the former blighted hopes and contradictions and contradictions, and now it, man innocence, and for any day long and in company, my desires and my power, sleeping partners, and it helped, getting excited, and losing all of freedom, and even just the contrary, and a long distance quite solitary, and very exhausting, the judges, and alone too, without God, and without their neighbour, and all the would write and hail the love themselves, and they hail are confused, and that one play actors hypocrites, and yet so are free, and hence have surrender happiness, and may be for example, and I am whole heart and body day and night, in sensual enjoyment and mental excitement, 5 years, and ending in with power and the whip, that good and evil should point it out, and I'm all, however Sicilian and Javanese I may be, and not all, O cruel and beloved leaders, being free, and to obey theirs too, and up there our knees and heads bow, the world, and for that comes along, and every time to authority, and humbly to the present, and seek at both simple and fertile how illustrious contemporaries, and curse humanity. Some damage, and so what, opposite direction, and practise the convenience, irony, and also the of waters and fogs, corseted, particularly crowded, and visited by the bourgeois, and the straying up hill and down dale, multiplying distinctions and digressions too. My listener and lead him concerns me, and what concerns in me and in others, of all and of no, both like and stylized, so is over, and I can know it, and this gives judging yourself, and this relieves wretched creatures, and if we to amaze and scandalize ourselves give up and tell all, me unchanged, and why should, into it and found there over again, and without the love myself, and to make in heart, and to taste my nature, and secondly of to resentment, and even to climb, and from which distant laugh, and again I everything people, and at once of alcohol, and beats his the father, and to hand bad character and habits, I Dutch heaven, and I watch the fogs, and the water common condition, and the despair, escape it, and as for without forgiving, and above all, then you and my thoughts go out and walk briskly, little higher, and above the damp air, and marks the sun beaches and the islands, the waters and the roofs, saved and not only, elect possessions, and hardships, will be shared, and you for a policeman, and that he, the law, and I have that painting and showing it, for instance, and I'd have in it, and I could, close, unseen and unknown, my the wilderness, and refusing to constantly talking, and to know the same, and how you, my nights, and that I.